I guess not really because I couldn't really keep structure. As in kaya, I couldn't really follow through a schedule persistently, except there is a great emotional push or if there's greater goal in mind. But I would say what would help is the timely structure, not the what we learn structure, if that makes sense. If in college you're there and you're usually by your own choice, and the field of study is designed that apa ya, what you chose you would have a level of interest, but it's pretty unstructured where you could learn many things out of order, which I think I like that more. Yeah, I like that more instead of the normal high school where you're given this curriculum from the government and you need to follow through whatever is inside. um, yeah, it helps with not procrastinating, that's for sure. It helps with not procrastinating because there's an urgency. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. there's math, so there's this urgency of this 1 hour time period you need to do math. Even though kaya I may not particularly like the subject, but there's an urgency on finishing it because yeah, what am I else supposed to do? So yeah, I think it helps with not procrastinating. That's for sure, I guess.
Can you elaborate what you mean with a timely structure?
A timely structure as in what I said before, when in high school, let's say from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. you need to do math, and from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. you need to do science. When there's that time frame, there's an urgency because it's an hour period and it's an urgency to do it, because what else am I going to do? Not skip the class? I don't think I can do that. But yeah, even if I'm not particularly interested in math or science, there's that urgency of, well, I need to do it because it's in that time period and it's imposed on me, so I gotta do it. But yeah, I guess it helps with not procrastinating. But I guess in college, because there's that gaps in free time and it's harder to start, right, rather than when there's no momentum. Even when I like this subject, I would end up procrastinating, as in kaya, oh well, I'll just learn this at home. But I learned it like what, 1-2 days later, or when there's a test because there's an urgency, right? Yeah, I guess it helps the timely structure of it when there's urgency of time, because like what else am I guys supposed to do?
That's interesting. Can I ask what's the initial push usually like for you?
What's the initial push? In college, yeah. The initial push. The initial push would be the emotional toll or of my reluctance on doing it. As in, let's say in that particular day, I am not really in the mood of studying statistics, even though yesterday I was really in the mood for it. That initial push comes from trying to motivate myself to learn statistic that day, because well, statistic is like right now and I have to do it. So I guess that initial push is setting me up in that mood. And if you're asking how does how does how do I dictate what mood I want to learn at that day? Usually it's from small menial things that I fixate, that in the grander scheme of things it doesn't matter. For example, if in that particular day I saw an interesting Instagram post about something related to numbers, that what compels me to connect the dots and bring up the mood of studying statistics. For example, it's usually small things that but it might seem like it has no significance at all, but it does, and I can't really control it on whether or not I'm in that mood for it. For example, yesterday, this is a real example. Yesterday, I was helping a friend with their thesis. I was helping a friend with with their thesis. I was skimming reading through it, and uh, in long story short, I helped help her out. And because I helped her out, and because I was analyzing her thesis, it made me in the mood to study qualitative methods. But in only in that period of time. But I couldn't find the books. So because I couldn't find the books, I was well, I'll just learn at home. But when I got home, I was not in the mood for it now, and I have to start that initial push of wanting to learn it.
What about the emotional toll mindset for
Okay. I guess emotional toll is the motivation. Yeah, the motivation or the mood on what I have to do, and that goes back to what I said about self-discipline, because there's a lot of moments where I need to discipline myself, despite on what I feel, and despite how hard it is to start the boulder. I need to still do it. I need to create the urgency myself, be it whatever, or even if I can talk myself out of that reasoning, I gotta convince myself somehow, because what else is there? And yeah, the emotional toll. I guess the mood. I guess about the mood, and I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's really not that simple as just discipline yourself by learning. It's really not, because sometimes I would get paralyzed on learning it, because or doing something, because well, that boulder just seems too big, and I just don't want to do it right now. But yeah.
if you get paralyzed? What do you usually do?
I learned to not really fight it, because it just creates. It's counterintuitive. It doesn't solve. It doesn't solve the issue, and usually it will create more mess, because I would do it but half-heartedly, and it would be not that good. It would be not that good, and yeah, it would be counterintuitive. I learned over time to not fight it, and just learn whatever I have in that mood. If I have 3 tasks, and that one task that I need to do, because that's the shortest deadline, let's say it's only in a day, but the other is still a week, but I only have the mood for that second task when the deadline is weeks later, I learned to just do the other task, instead of trying to fight to to do the first task, even though the deadline is much shorter.
How did you learn that?
Self-discipline, I guess. Self-discipline by reinforcement. Yeah, and I guess the reinforcement comes from, I guess, self-shame. Sure. Okay, I think that's what I did in that period of time, where I learned to what is it called? To feel guilt or shame if I'm not doing this particular thing. Yeah. For example, even though it's irrational, but I learned to convince myself in that moment in time. So it's at least I do it, right? For example, if I didn't do this task, I would be a worse psychologist later in the future, or I would, or my dad, or what if my dad would not able to pay me next semester, and I need to finish my study faster. Even though it's sometimes it's really not rational, and it's just I know myself that that's not gonna happen, but I learned to convince myself in that moment of time to create that urgency, because usually I don't really come across that scenario much often, because again, going back to the first 2 scenarios I said before, there's usually a level of interest that would push me, or there would be a sense of urgency. But in, I guess rare cases, not really rare, but yeah, not really rare, where the level of interest is so low and the urgency is super non-existent because the deadline is like in 2 weeks or whatever. I just learned to, kayak, create that urgency myself, and that urgency usually comes from negative reinforcement that I create in my head or whatever I had in mind. I learned to get convinced in that moment in time at least, or maybe it lingers the effects, but I don't know. I don't really think about it.
Does the reinforcement relate to the emotional toll that you mentioned?
Elaborate. What does that mean?
You mentioned that the emotional toll is your driving factor, your motivation.
Okay.
And the reinforcement would it be a driving force, or what does reinforcement do for you?
When I say emotional toll, would be the motivation, right? If I'm motivated enough to do it. If I'm not motivated enough, if I'm not disinterested in the subject, it would feel like I'm being forced to do this, and it sucks. Okay, it feels like, why am I doing this? And okay, but I still need to do it because what else am I gonna do? And that emotional toll would probably be that negative feeling of it's like as if I'm being forced to learn this because I'm so disinterested in the subject and the urgency is really far. But what else am I? What can I do? What else can I do? I need to finish it. So what else can I do? So it feels like I'm being forced to do it. If you say, does that negative reinforcement is the emotional driving factor? I guess so. I mean, it helps with the motivation because it creates urgency, right? It creates superficial urgency, at least. Because in the back of my head, I know it's not real. But I learned to really talk myself out of it, I guess. I learned to, I guess, convince myself in that moment in time where I was in the most panicky state. Okay, I really need to do this. Or no, okay, when I'm later on when I'm doing my thesis, I'm gonna be so bad at it if I don't learn this or something like that.
Are there any particular spaces or settings that help you focus or engage more effectively?
Okay. Particular space. I would prefer it to be in my room, of course. I would prefer it to be in my room, yeah. But if my room is messy, if it's cluttered, it would bring the mood to, well, I'm just gonna lay down, or yeah. Interesting note is when I was in a library, it really brings me in the mood to learn, or it really brings me in the mood to write, or it brings me in that mood because everyone else was doing it and it was tidy. The environment is set in such a way where I attribute it to, oh, it's learning time because there's books everywhere, there's people doing something, there's people in their computer, and I guess it sets my brain to that mood of, okay, oh, I guess we're learning. But even though I don't really like crowded places and I would rather to do my task at home, if my room, I don't know how to describe it, but if my room is in that specific state where it induces my brain to attribute it to resting time, I would just procrastinate because it's resting time by the environment, if that makes sense.
What makes your room the environment where you feel that you can focus more?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What is it? If it's dirty, if my desk is full of stuff, or if my bed is messy, or if it smells in a particular way, or if it's too cold where it can induce the sleeping time, or I guess anything else. I guess that's how I could I guess that's what I could say. I would assume that people I would assume every people does that. and every people have different attribution on what resting time in their room is. Maybe some people, when their bed is messy, it induces them to learn because, oh well, my bed is a mess, I couldn't sleep in it. Maybe, but in my head it just assumes like oh, I should be sleeping there because it's messy. I would assume every people have different attribution on what resting is, of what resting time room environment is. But in that's the best I could explain it. It's like my body compels to do it because of what I look around. Even though I may not pay attention to it, but subtle cues that I may not, well, I did pick up on it, but I just didn't think of it, still affects me to be in that mood.
What makes your room a place for you to study too then?
Because I like a more well, I guess I'm a more reclusive person, so I don't really like working when there's a lot of people involved. So the reason why the room is chosen to be one of the study room is because I'm alone. That's really it. But if I could, if there's a place where it's outside and it's a small box where it's tidy and clean, I would do it. I would still go there. Yeah, I just like working alone, I guess, and that's why my room is like the best place of it, I guess.
What do you feel about your classroom environment then?
Classroom environment. Classroom. Well, in my particular setting, the classroom is not that huge, and there's not many people there. There's usually what 11, 10, usually less than that. And if that's the case, well, it's better because if that's the case, but I never really mind it because, well, there's less people and there's not a lot of people and it's not too loud, especially. So that's why I don't mind it.
What distractions do you usually find affecting you?
Sounds, and yeah. I guess I'm really keen on sounds, and I don't like when there's higher, louder environment. But I don't like it too quiet too. I like it to where I could listen to music while doing stuff. The way I see it, there's a minimum level of noise that I have to function in, and if it's too loud, I couldn't use my music. And because I couldn't use my music, I would listen to the environment instead, and that could affect me. Or also, I guess this is unrelated to ADHD, but it's more related to social, I guess, anxiety. I guess, right? Because I feel like when everyone is talking, it just fills my brain, and it just fills my head, and I would attribute one or two things into me instead, even though I know, okay, it's not like I know they're not talking about me, but it just happens subconsciously, and I can't really do anything about that. For example, if the environment is too loud, or if there's too many people, and in my I hear 2-3 people laughing, I would attribute it that's for me, or somehow one way or another it's because of me, or it's because I look stupid or whatever. But I know better that that's not the case. But that small tidbits of subconscious mind where I need to kaya, okay, stop, you're being irrational, and they're not they're not talking about you, and kaya there's another sound and I attribute it, and I have to shut down that as well, and like, oh, you know what, stop, okay, that's not real, and one thing, and it distracts me from doing the actual thing that I need to do. But if it's too silent, I would just be in my head, and I would just if it's too silent, I would just think about other things that is not really related to what I'm actually studying or what I'm actually doing. An interesting note is that I kind of forgot what meds I use, but whatever meds I use, it just dampens the sound I have internally. So it feels like the sounds are coming from the other room. I could still hear it, but it dampens. So it really made me focus to work, I guess, to do the work. Yeah.
When you talk about sounds, is it only external or also internal? If you mention about noises in your mind.
I can't really control the internal voice, do I? So the best way to control it is the external one. If I can't control the level of internal noise I do have, what I can do is control the external ones. Um, so I guess both. But the reason why the external is much more affecting is because it's the most controllable one, where I could just move to another place, or I could listen to music, right? But some ear sets, they still allow sounds to come in. But if it's just music and it's just music and with my internal noise, I could focus without meds. I could really focus on that. But yeah, again, why I mention more external noise is that because it's the most controllable one, where I could move, or I could do it home, or yeah.
Did it also affect you when you're taking exams?
Taking exams? Ooh, not quite. I don't think it affects me on exams that much because I'm constantly thinking. Because exams are questions and you need to solve them, and there's an urgency. Okay, I'll show you what's the difference between. What about just studying with quiz then? Okay, I'll show you the difference. When in an exam setting, there's stakes involved. This is my score. This is gonna represent me later on. What my final grade is. There's external. What's it called? There's external scoring. The professors are gonna see this. This is gonna be an assessment on my score. This is gonna be what. There's stakes. There's urgency and there's stake. So I'm locked in on the questions involved because I would answer it without any problem, without needing any external noise. Because I'm too focused. Because usually my internal noise would be, okay, let's do this exam, because there's urgency, right? There's urgency, and I'm constantly thinking. So it doesn't affect an exam. I don't need specific environment, or I don't need specific noise to do well, quote unquote, to do well in exams, because the urgency is already enough to make me present in the moment.
Okay. Have you faced any difficulties in getting the support or accommodations that you need for your ADHD at university?
If it's in there's difficulties everywhere, in universities, in larger communities, in smaller communities like families or close family members. I don't think there's much support at all. And if in especially in university, if we're talking about solely universities, I don't think they care enough to to do that, frankly, because, well, I don't think it's that impairment. I don't know. Okay, I feel like it's their own responsibility to manage it. I mean, for me at least, I need to manage it. I even got meds to do that too. When the internal noise gets too high, for example, because of my stress, when that in the first 5th semester, right? I even got meds with my own money and with my own, doing, because I don't think they would care enough to do that. I don't think they would care enough to do that, and I feel like there's this notion of, well, it's their problem and they need to regulate it on their own, which is partly true. If if ADHD is the minority, or if it's not the grander percentage of the university students, I would understand why they wouldn't do that in a financial setting. And in a practical setting too. I kind of understand, and that's why I would because there is no support involved. I would just do it myself, I guess, because what else am I gonna do, right? Yeah.
Do you think there is anything that the university can do to help support your ADHD stuff?
Ooh. Environment would really help. The simplest thing that I have in mind on what they could do they could group us together with other neurodivergent persons. I think that would really help because it creates this environment where they could relate to one another, and they could make a more understandable learning setting. And I guess that's the simplest thing they could do. They could just group these neurodivergent people um, into one classroom setting. I think that's what I had in mind. The simplest thing and the most realistic thing they could do is that if they want to go further and beyond, they could add specialized rooms for them. But I don't think it's. I think it's very optimistic, right?
What's a specialized room like?
For example, if people like me that has really specific sound levels, I would want the specialized room to be dead quiet, and I would want there is an ambient sound where I could maintain that level of external noise and internal noise, where I could be present. I guess that's if my specialized room. But again, neurodivergence are really there's varying, right? And I don't think they could make each specialized rooms for them because I don't think that's possible. But they could create. Oh, this is for sounds. This is for out visual or maybe or things like that. But if I'm requested, oh, what do you want? Well, I want a specialized room for sounds. I want the room to be really dead quiet, and by mean dead quiet, I really mean dead quiet without the AC noise, without any noise, and there's just an ambient sound that I could tweak, where I could set it to a specific level where I could really be present.
What do you think about the facilities at your university?
I think it's all right. Again, there's not much people in the classroom itself, so I don't think it becomes a problem. But I do notice half the time that I would space out because I'm more concerned on the internal voice I do have in my head. But half of the time, because again the materials are interesting enough. Because I chose this major, and I'm interested. I have a level of interest in every subject taught. That every subject that is taught that. So half the time I would be focused because there's that interest, right? Because there's an interest, even though if there's no urgency, there's still that interest, and that would usually keep me focused for a few on and off minutes before maybe if the presenter is not doing a good job explaining it, or if the presenter has a material that I do not particularly enjoy, I would lose focus. But I would focus on whatever he said or they said a few minutes ago that I find interesting, and I would fixate on that instead, and that's where I spaced out. Yeah.
What do you think can be done to make your learning experience to be more engaging?
Ooh. If more engaging, I would say the fostering of an active classroom, but in a way where it's not putting down other people. By means putting down other people is okay. I guess I'll give an example. When I was back in statistic class, back in statistic class, there is numerous times where I had the answer on what they asked in mind, but I never said it. I never raised my hand or whatnot because I was discouraged. And when the answer is actually spoken, I would be like, damn, that's what I thought, but I didn't speak it out. So, but an engaging teaching experience like that, by asking questions and making the student answer,